I'm the token woman, in case you were wondering. Not really. You've heard of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, the land of Minnesota nice, where we don't allow any cantankerous people to be elected to our state legislators. Sometime in about 2000, I think, a young woman in our community, Jackie Johnston, who I would like to point out does not have a drop of Scottish blood, but had the good sense to marry a fine Scottish gentleman, came to me and said, "Babs, we need a Minnesota tartan." Yeah, Jackie, I said, yeah. I had other fish to fry. I was trying to get Tartan Day organized in Minnesota. And shortly thereafter, she came to me and said, "Babs, we gotta have a Minnesota tartan." And she got the same, yeah. About the third time, she's a very tenacious woman, and she said, "Babs, we have to have a Minnesota tartan." And I said, "Jackie, do it. Do it." Well, this is the book that Jackie prepared on the Minnesota Tartan Project. At the time, I was the coordinator of Minnesota Tartan Day Cooperative. The members of the Minnesota Tartan Day Cooperative were 14 Scottish organizations, pipe bands, dance groups in Minnesota, including St. Andrew's Society, Twin Cities Scottish Club, the Minnesota Coalition of Scottish Clans, 3 pipe bands, several dance groups, a couple of reenactment groups. If they were doing something Scottish in Minnesota, and if they had been participating in Tartan Day, and they had, I asked them to be a part of the Minnesota Tartan Day Cooperative. And they agreed. And out of that grew what is a very strong celebration of Tartan Day in Minnesota, and we will celebrate for the 13th time this coming Saturday and Sunday. So it was logical to ask Jackie Johnston to be the Minnesota Tartan Project Coordinator. And as we were talking about how to go about doing this, we decided that we would ask each of the organizations who participated in the Minnesota Tartan Day Cooperative to submit colors, the colors of Minnesota, and why they should be a part of the Minnesota Tartan. And we got a lot of suggestions. Certainly you have heard of the iron ore range in Minnesota. A rust color was suggested. Some people thought that because the colors of the Minnesota University were maroon and gold, that they should be incorporated into the tartan. But you might know that Clan Macmillan has a beautiful maroon and gold tartan, and so we didn't think that was a good idea. And as Dr. Smith pointed out, you can get too many colors. So we had limited the colors that we would choose to 6. And we actually didn't count black and white, even though black and white are the colors of the Minnesota bird, which is the loon. So the colors that were chosen were green for the forests and fields, Norway pine, Douglas fir, the Norway pine being the state tree of Minnesota. We also have a blueberry muffin. Matthew, we have an official muffin in Minnesota. We have an official beverage. It's milk. Yeah. Blue, of course, for the land of sky blue waters. That didn't originate with hams. I'm sorry. Minnesota as a state had that first. Actually, in Native American language, the word Minnesota and Mississippi mean, where did we go? Mean the land of sky blue waters. Duh, hello. We also chose a mulberry or pink. I don't know if you're familiar with the lady slipper that is the official flower of Minnesota. There's a yellow lady slipper and a royal lady slipper. Again, the official flower of Minnesota. It has a beautiful fuchsia pink center. And that's what we were looking for. We chose a yellow gold, which again is the lady slipper, is full colors, and for the golden opportunities to be found in Minnesota. And then black and white. Well, we turned those colors over to Mark Osweiler, who is known to Dr. Smith, and who is a member of the Scottish Tartan Authority. And he fed them into a computer program and came up with something like 40 designs. Well, that was just a bit too many, so he culled that down to about 15. And a few weeks later, come back here. At the McAllister Scottish Fair, which was held annually on the first Saturday in May, Bob McWilliam has been there more than once. We gathered in the rain, under umbrellas, and looked at these 15 designs that Mark had brought to us. And in a rather short amount of time, maybe it was the rain, I don't know. I thought I was having a good time, rain or no. Unanimously, all those organizations, St. Andrews, Twin Cities Scottish Club, the dance groups, the fair, the Scottish organization, events group, all agreed without any argument, without one word or voice of condescension on this. The Minnesota tartan. So the next question was, what do we do about this? It's now the 1st of May. So some people came forward, people who were kilt makers. We talked about how the set had to fall in order to be kilted appropriately, either in the military or whatever. And I don't know, Dr. Smith, did they talk to you about counts, color counts and things like that? I don't know, they figured it out. We contacted a man by the name of Peter Wilson at escot.net. He got a hold of a weaver in Vancouver, Fraser and Kirkbright, and we got some yarn samples at the Renaissance Festival Highland Fling Weekend. The members of the Minnesota Tartan Day Cooperative gathered around a tent and looked at yarn samples. And they finally agreed on the colors that best reflected what they had in mind. Who knew there were so many greens? Who knew there were so many blues? But we finally narrowed it down to what we wanted, and they sent us some samples. The color we had the most problem with was the fuchsia. If you look at the tartan, where the fuchsia crosses the blue, you see purple for the flower of Scotland. But this, we like that. We finally got samples of the fabric and found that the colors were finally to our acceptability. And the next step was to get some produced so that we could show it to our community and get people ordering it. We did that in November at a McAllister Pipe Band concert. It was the first public showing of the Minnesota tartan, and it was just loved by everyone who saw it. This, of course, is the dress tartan version, and our Scottish Celtic dance groups have many competition kilts made out of this tartan and sashes for the national dance out of this tartan. We were very happy about that. So once we had a really good response from our community that they love this tartan, and yes, they would buy it, and I have to tell you, my son here in the front row, Jack Barker, whom you may know from the Tartan Day buttons, he's been designing them since 2001, wanted to have the first kilt made out of the Minnesota tartan, and he did. Once the first of the year rolled around, we realized, okay, we want to get this done. We want to get it established so we can get it accepted by the Scottish Tartan Authority. So we went about finding some senators. My senator, Jane Random, Jackie's senator, who, interestingly enough, Jackie had run against her for state senate some years previously, but she was thrilled and asked to be the chief sponsor. Another senator who stepped forward was Senator Satvar Chardre, who happens to be East Indian. We actually had someone come forward who is a Scottish Anderson, and then from Rochester, Minnesota, another state senator. We had 5 sponsors to this legislation. On February 2nd, 2002, exactly 51 weeks from our very first meeting to talk about should we do a Minnesota tartan, our resolution was introduced to the Minnesota Senate and was approved unanimously, 59-0. We had a piper in the state capitol. I think that was the first time there'd ever been a piper at the Minnesota State Capitol. They won't let us have music there. We had to move our Tartan Day celebrations out to the steps because when the legislature's in session, no music inside the building. That's okay. We go out on the steps, it's fine. But that day, there were Minnesota pipes heard in the state capitol. A group of women who were involved in this project made a little corsage boutonniere. Each one of the senators was given that. They were each given a sample of the tartan, and it was a completely joyful experience for us. There was no quarreling, there was nobody that didn't like it. I feel so badly when I hear about these states where these horrible quarrels develop in what should be a wonderful experience. I don't know what our secret was. Maybe it's because we've developed a really strong and enthusiastic Scottish community, but it was just great. I would just like to say how honored I am to be on this stage with Matthew, whom I met at Stone Mountain many years ago, and Dr. Smith, who of course has been a hero of mine for years and years, and who gave me a great gift a few years ago when he told me there was a Humphrey tartan. And I have had pieces of that woven locally by a weaver who does tartans in silk, and I wear it with great pride, and thank you very much, Dr. Smith. And Bob McWilliam, of course, he's my neighbor. What can I say, Wisconsin, Minnesota, we're good neighbors. And I've sort of heard a little bit about his struggles with getting a Minnesota tartan. And we only have now maybe 6 states who don't show a tartan on that map that John provided for us. And I would just, I want you to know why we opted to do this by resolution rather than bill of law, which is what Bob did. Minnesota was not in the best economic state in 2001 and 2002. And I'm here to tell you it's even worse today. But a bill of law would require the state that everything that they print that has the loon, that has the tree, that has the gopher, that has the muffin, the mushroom, the milk, would have to be reprinted to accommodate the Minnesota tartan. So that wasn't what we were looking for. We weren't looking for it to be printed on material that would be passed out at rest stops for tourists. We're just looking for something for our community and something that the Scottish Tartan Authority would accept. And so that was why we opted to go by resolution rather than bill of law. It was cheaper for our state to do it that way. And we're very proud that we have resolution 164 that gave Minnesota an official tartan and an official dress tartan. This incredible book, I'll put it up there, it documents everything. All her correspondence with the weavers, the senators, everything. If you want to know how to do a state tartan, check out Jackie's book, because it's the way to go. Easy. Thank you.